Superstars are very important to the UFC as they need fighters with big names and big attraction to headline fight nights and pay-per-views and just be big attraction to draw in pay-per-view numbers. Now in the UFC there are hundreds of fighters. Most of those fighters do fight on the prelims, but there are only a select few that you could call a superstar. And in this video I've gone through quite a few fighters that are currently on the UFC roster which do have the opportunity to become a superstar, an opportunity to become a very popular fighter. Some of them are already a fan favorite, some of them haven't even made their UFC debut yet but are signed to the promotion. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If there's someone that you think that I've forgotten about, let me know in the comments as well. And let's just get into it. The first fighter is, we're going to start a little bit left field. We're going to start out with some fighters that I think have the opportunity to become big names. The first one is Felipe Do Santos. Now if you know me, I'm a massive fan of Felipe Do Santos, but at the end of the day, I do believe that Felipe Do Santos has the opportunity to become a big name. Look at Charles Oliveira. Felipe Do Santos and Charles Oliveira fight the exact same way, but in two different weight classes. Felipe Do Santos is unbelievably fun to watch. Super aggressive, shoot box, Diego Lima sort of style. If you do know the fighters from that gym, they all fight similarly. They all fight in a fun way. Felipe Do Santos is close to Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira regularly does take him in Instagram stories. So getting that boost from a big name like Charles Oliveira and putting on big performances, win or lose, could really boost the name value of the 23-year-old Felipe Do Santos from Brazil. He came in on short notice against Beneil Dariush, lost a decision, made it pretty close with Beneil Dariush, had quite a few very good moments in that fight as well, where he just showed off the shooter box style, moving forward, having a lot of success on the feet. I think you could see Felipe Do Santos have a potentially big career at 125 pounds. Race Saruya is another fighter that I think that could have a big career at 125. He's going to be making his UFC debut in the Road to UFC finals, and he's going to be taking on Jinyu Shi, who is from China. But if you do look at his fight style, it is very entertaining if he can get a finish, because Race Saruya is very similar to Tatu Tera, who is also on this list. Now I do understand that Tera already is a big name, but he does have the opportunity to become bigger. But this part here is about Race Saruya. And the main reason really is I do believe that there is quite a big market space for the UFC to have some big name fighters from Japan. Dana White said that when he signed Yusaku Kinoshita, he thought maybe Yusaku Kinoshita could be that guy from Japan to really blow up and become a big name. But I believe Race Saruya could be another flyweight that the UFC could invest in, and a guy himself that I do believe could end up having success in the UFC with his current skill set. Now, he is very much a grappler. He just spams takedowns over and over and over again, but his grappling is elite. He is fun to watch. He is quite skilled. If he can get past Jinyu Shi, which is going to be no easy feat whatsoever, he should be able to get into the UFC and have quite a bit of success. Only 21 years old, which is also worth noting. Unbelievably young, undefeated. He's got everything ahead of him. The next fighter is Kwin Lee, or Lee Kwin. Now, Lee Kwin, you might look at his record and think, that's not a good record. How could this guy be a star? Trust me, this guy does have massive star potential. I really do believe in him. If you look at him, he's got a crazy look. He's got a lot of tattoos on his body. He comes off with a lot of swagger, like a pretty cool guy. He's got a tattoo on his face as well, which is always kind of adds to that look, kind of makes him look pretty scary, pretty cool sort of fighter, sort of swag look there. But he did have a pretty good, that was just really cringe the way I described him, but you'll see it. If you look at a photo of Lee Kwin, you'll understand what I mean. But when it comes down to him in one championship, he had a crazy career, man. A lot of KO wins. I believe he's fighting at 155. He's come down to 145 to be fighting in the UFC in the Road to UFC tournament. He knocked out Kailu in just a little bit over a minute. Looked really good. And then took on Kuya Kanda. Absolutely terrible fight. It was unbelievably boring. I do understand that you can watch that fight and think, man, that's so boring. But trust me, I do believe that Lee Kwin does have a lot of opportunity to become a very big name in the UFC. And not just for the UFC, but a big name in China as well. He seems like he probably has a pretty crazy story if you do look into him a little bit more. But I do believe that Lee Kwin, with his fight style, with his look, with his appeal, I think that he could appeal to a Chinese audience and also just a worldwide audience as well. I think he's got the opportunity to become pretty big. The next fighter I have is Nurol Aliev, and you might look at Nurol and you might look at his record again and you might think, this guy's had almost 50 professional fights. Why is he on this list? If you look at him, this guy has 1.4 million followers on Instagram, and I'm not entirely sure if they are all real, but I do know for a fact that he is a celebrity in Uzbekistan where he does live, because I do believe he was on a reality TV show. I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, Rusev, he's an MMA fighter, he's in the UFC, he won his debut, but he is a celebrity in Uzbekistan. I could be wrong though, maybe all of his followers are botted. Who knows, but he came in against Bruno Ferreira and knocked him out in 80 seconds. And with the way that he does fight, and man, this guy gets a lot of finishes. Does he fight the best competition all the time? Not really in the past, but man, if this guy's getting finishes, it's in round 1. And you know what people love to see? They love to see round 1 finishes, man. And if you see Rusev, he's representing the country of Uzbekistan, who is already completely behind him, seemingly on Instagram, following him. I think that we could see Nurol Rusev be one of those guys that could headline a fight night in the future if he can get out there into the rankings potentially, keep getting better, only 29 years old, so much experience. I think he does have opportunity in the future to maybe, you know, bring the UFC to a country like in the surrounding areas of Uzbekistan, headline an event there. Who knows? The next one is Benoit Saint-Denis. Very impressive performance at UFC 295. I mean, he just beat Matt Frivola. He's going to be ranked now, and I think that's going to be very good for him and his career. He represents France. He's seemingly one of the better fighters that France does have to offer that's currently signed to the UFC, and they're already behind him. If you look at Benoit Saint-Denis, this guy does have a pretty loyal fan base, a pretty crazy fan base. I would almost go out and say he lost to Zaleski in his debut on short notice, upper weight class. Since then, massive finishing streak, 5 wins, 5 finishes over good opponents, Bonfim, Moises, Frivola, 3 back-to-backs. I mean, great, fantastic wins there. He's been looking really good. I think Benoit Saint-Denis gets a little bit of a step up in competition in the future. At only 27 years old, seems like a pretty likable guy himself. I think that him and France could really, I think France could really get behind Benoit Saint-Denis, make him a massive French star. But I think the world could get behind Benoit Saint-Denis, and he could be a guy like Cyril Gane, who goes out there and headlines events in France, headlines events in Paris. Benoit Saint-Denis could be one of those guys that really brings the UFC to Paris more than once a year. So I think that Benoit Saint-Denis, absolutely a guy that could become a star in the future. The next one is Peyton Talbert. He hasn't made his debut yet. At the time of me recording this video, he actually makes his debut this weekend. And if he loses that debut, then, you know, I would kind of second guess putting him on this list. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. I see a loss in Peyton Talbert. The problem with me is when I get behind prospects, they normally don't go too well. I've done it in the past. You know, Esteban Ridovic was a guy that I was super high on. He lost his debut. I mean, there's some embarrassing ones. There's some guys out there that I rated way higher than they actually are. But I do believe in Peyton Talbert. And one thing I'm going to say about Peyton Talbert is, if you guys have never heard of this guy before, he is very similar to Sean O'Malley. And I do believe that he does have Sean O'Malley upside in his skill set and in his stardom. He's got a very interesting personality that I do believe will appeal to a lot of people. He's got a cool look that I believe a lot of people would appeal to a lot of people as well. Fights like Sean O'Malley, looks kind of similar to Sean O'Malley, kind of, and he's kind of built like him as well. 5'10", a striker. Not only that, a fun striker with KO power. He will take one to give one. His takedown defense isn't that great, but it's getting much better. It looks really good on the Contender Series. But Peyton Talbot, man, I'm telling you guys, he is going to be someone to watch out for. I believe that Peyton Talbot could become a star. He's going to have to go out there and get his win over Nick Aguirre in his debut. Talbot's a guy to watch out for, man. I really do believe that this guy could become a massive name for the UFC in the future. And now we've got Tatu Tera. I did kind of talk about him earlier on. I feel like you can't really make a list like this without including Tatu Tera, just because, you know, he's already a pretty big name for Japan. The UFC is building him up really slowly. And honestly, I'm not even mad, because if you look at him, he's 23 years old. It's not like Tatu Tera is 28 years old and he needs to get into the rankings now. He needs to really work while he's in his prime. This guy's like years away from his prime. He's 23. He's super young. One thing that I really love about him is this guy fights all the time. This guy is super active. He's always seeming to have in fights. He's going to be taking on Carlos Hernandez in his next fight. I believe he should be able to get past Carlos Hernandez at the end of this year. And he's going to be 15-0. 15-0 just in itself is a record that you can market. Now that I think about it, I probably could have and should have put Michael Morales on this list, but I completely forgot to do that. So add him to this list as well. But Tatu Tera, a fighter on this list, a guy that I think could be pretty big for Japan in the UFC. Already is pretty big for Japan in the UFC. I've got Tera on the list. And now I've got Nurol Aliev. 22 years old. And the reason why the UFC went out there and signed so many fighters from Tajikistan this year, I believe the UFC, after he made his debut against Rafael Alves in 2023, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the UFC has since signed 4 fighters from Tajikistan, and Nurol Aliev was one of the first that they had done that, because if you do look at the Rafael Alves broadcast, they bring up that a whole stadium full of people in Tajikistan all gathered to watch a massive screen where Aliev made his debut. Nurol Aliev is a superstar in Tajikistan, and he could be a superstar around the world as well, I believe. I mean, this is a guy that is representing Tajikistan, representing them well because he's a great fighter. The country is completely behind him. They absolutely love this guy. But the good thing about him, man, is like you can look at Nurol Aliev and he looks pretty similar to Khabib, right? Like he looks almost identical, kind of side by side. If you squint a little bit, they look similarly and they fight similarly. Nurol Aliev fights like Khabib, looks similarly to Khabib. I mean, he calls himself the Tajik Eagle, so he doesn't mind the comparisons. I think that Nurol Aliev is a guy that can go far. He already is, to Tajikistan, the country, a superstar for them. I think he could become a star worldwide, you know. I think this guy does have a lot of upside. I think he could go far in the UFC. I think he could go far with a stardom, and that's why I put him so high up on this list. But the fighter that I made this list around is Diego Lopez. Now, you might think, man, like, you know, I can think of somebody else that I'd make this list around, and he's not even on the list. So put him on the list, man, because trust me, guys, I mean, I definitely probably forgot some fantastic names, but Diego Lopez is the last fighter I want to talk about. He's the reason why I made this list. Lopez come out of absolutely nowhere, man. You know, he's walking in there against Movsar Evloev. I was kind of like, you know what, like he is dangerous, but Movsar Evloev is a top 15 guy. He's a highly ranked guy. He should be able to just run over Diego Lopez. That didn't happen. Lopez went in there against Evloev and gave him a very tough fight. And on a full camp, maybe that fight could have gone differently. Like, I mean, I'm not like making any statements, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. Lopez was so close to finishing that fight, and so many opportunities. He hurt Evloev on the feet in round 1, had Evloev in a tough spot in a submission, I believe, in round 1. But round 3, he had Evloev in some very, very tough submission positions there. He did lose on the Contender Series to Joanderson Brito. Was kind of a weird fight with that round 3 kind of getting cut off super early. But if you look at Lopez, man, he must have made some rapid improvements, because he is looking like a completely different fighter than he fought in 2021 to now. And even then with Lopez himself, he's only 28 years old. He's absolutely massive for the weight class. He has a fun fighting style. But the most important thing about Lopez is he really could market this quite well. Is that legendary haircut, man. That Justin Bieber style haircut with the mullet out the back. I don't know how he pulls it off. I mean, I've got the mullet right here. You know, it's pretty greasy at the moment. Trust me, guys. I did have a shower yesterday. I'm about to have a shower later today after this video. But my goodness, that is a beautiful mullet. One mullet to another. Good mullet. A better mullet than mine. I'll try and get there. But man, Diego Lopez. This guy's a star, man. Like, this guy has the opportunity to become a star. He represents multiple countries, Brazil and Mexico, 2 countries that love to get behind their fighters. And even then, he's a coach. He coaches Alexa Grasso, so Alexa Grasso is always posting her with him, talking about him, you know, because he coaches so many great fighters. He coaches Lopez Godinez and other fighters at Lobo Gym that I'm just trying to think about. He's beaten good fighters. In 90 seconds, he knocked out Pat Sabatini on the main card at UFC 295. If this guy rises up the rankings and gets these finishes to, I think, 350k bonuses he's got in his UFC career. If this guy keeps rising up the rankings, he keeps winning, He keeps getting better. I mean, Diego Lopez, man, I don't know like if I could really see him becoming a champion just with his style, because it is very finish or bust. That is Diego Lopez's style on the feet. He's so aggressive on the ground. He's willing to take guard and positions like that. But trust me, guys, I think that Diego Lopez is a guy that can just become a massive name. He already is a big name amongst like the hardcore fans. But man, once the casual fans get a load of this guy, I mean, look at him, the Justin Bieber haircut. I think you could go to the moon. And that's everything there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I just moved house, so let me know if the audio sounds all good. Nothing I can do about the background. That is the room, how it is set up. I don't really have the space to rearrange the room to make it have like a cool background like I did, unfortunately, in the past. But yeah, this is the setup. This is how it is. I mean, this is my new room. This is where I'm going to be living for the next year or so. So I'll see you guys in the next one.